Hello and welcome. In this video we are going to take a look at how to create an MVC application, and I'm just going to go over a few of the different components that make up an MVC application and show you how to update your packages so that you're using the latest versions, which should put you in a good position to start development. So let's load up Visual Studio. I'm using 2019, but this process will be the same if not similar across most versions of Visual Studio. So let's click create a new project. I'm going to go ahead and select ASP.NET Web Application using the .NET framework. You can of course use ASP.NET Core Web Application as well. For this example though, we're using the .NET framework. So let's click on this and then click next. I'm going to use the latest version of .NET. Always make sure you use the latest version unless you've got a good reason to choose something else. Let's go ahead and click create. Here we have various different project templates. Of course, in this instance we're creating an MVC project, so ensure you select that and click create. Visual Studio will go ahead and get our new project ready, and over here on the right hand side, as you can see, we've got our project. Above that we have a solution. A solution can contain multiple projects. Let's have a look what else we've got. We've got properties. So in properties we've got an assembly info file. This file allows you to change the assembly version and file version as and when you upgrade your code. Below that we've got references. References contain all of the various libraries that we're using. You can add or remove libraries. Just right click, add reference for example. This will allow you to go ahead and add another library. A library is just a bunch of code, so if there's a particular piece of functionality you require, let's say in system.design, you can select that and then click OK, and it will add the file to your project. Next we have app_data, which at the moment is empty. This is where you would have your database files. Below that we have app_start. In here we have a couple of files. The first one is a bundle config class. This allows you to bundle up various different client-side assets. So for example, you can bundle up various different CSS files into one bundle. I'll probably be going over these various different components in more detail in other videos, so keep an eye out for that. This is just a brief overview though. Below that we have a filter config file. This allows you to add filters so you can execute code either before, for example, or after an action has been carried out. So an action method. An action method, if this terminology is new to you, is essentially what we will execute on a HTTP request. So a request will come in and we will route that to a particular action method, and an action method is essentially a method of a class, but it's actually a specific type of class, so it's a method of a controller. Below that we have the route config. Now the route config class allows you to define routes that essentially will have a look at every URL, every request that comes through, and it will route the request to a specific controller and an action. So what we've got here is we've got the default route, and that takes the format of controller/action/ID. The ID is an optional URL parameter. Action will be whatever's entered, and if nothing's entered, the default will be index, and controller will be again whatever is entered, otherwise the default will be home. So if somebody, for example, was to just go to the domain with nothing extra added after that, they would essentially go to the index action of the home controller or to put it another way, they would go to the index method of the home class that happens to inherit from a controller. Here we've got content. Now content is essentially client-side assets, so as you can see we've got some CSS files in there, Bootstrap, and a main site CSS file. Below that we've got controllers, which is where the C comes from in MVC. We've got a home controller which has been added by default, and as you can see a home controller is nothing more than a class that inherits from a controller, and all of these methods return an action result and are considered actions themselves. Below that we've got a fonts folder, so as the name implies this is where any fonts that our site is using will be stored. I think that a better place for the fonts folder would probably be within content. Below that we've got models, which is where the N comes from in MVC. Now in this instance we don't have any models, but the models will essentially just be classes that represent objects within your problem domain. So for example, if your project was based around a university type of application, then you may, for example, have a class in there called student, and you might have various different properties for, I don't know, you might have ID, you could also have a name perhaps, and you might have, I don't know, language, for example. And obviously these would be strings. Struggling to type today. String. Alright, that'll do. Let's build it anyway, even though we're not using it. So these are where your models will be stored. You'll likely have a whole bunch of classes in here to represent objects in your problem domain. A class, which this is essentially a blueprint upon which objects at runtime can be created. Here we've got a scripts folder, and in here we've got a bunch of JavaScript, we've got jQuery, we've got Bootstrap, and you'd probably add, much like the CSS folder where you had a site.css, which is where you'd be adding your own styles probably. You don't have to, but that's where you probably would add your own styles. So for example in site you could add a style, for example, I don't know, we could say we want all header 1 tags to be, let's say, let's find font weight, and you could say you want them to be bold, for example. Although technically speaking I think they probably are already bold, so we could say we wanted them to be normal. Save that. Likewise in the scripts folder you'd probably go ahead and add your own file for your own custom JavaScript. There we go, JavaScript file, and in there you could put your own client-side scripts. Again, much like with the fonts class, I think probably a better location for scripts would probably be in content. So you'd have all your client-side assets in one folder, so you'd have your CSS, you'd have your JavaScript, and you'd have your fonts. That's probably where I would put them, but I probably wouldn't move them either. So if this is where Visual Studio has put them by default, you could probably go ahead and leave it. You've got a views folder, and of course this is where the V comes from in MVC, and this is where your views will be stored. So as you can see, we've got home and we've got shared. So let's have a look at home. So generally speaking, what you'll have, let's have a look at the controllers. For every controller you'll have a folder in views. So because we've got a home controller, we've got a home folder, and in the home folder we've got 3 views, and if we flip back to the home controller we've actually got 3 methods. And by convention, if you return view from your method, from your action, what it will do is it will look in the views folder for a home folder and then an index or an about or a contact file. So as you can see, this is a folder which mimics the controller, if you like, or represents the controller, and then here we've got a view for every single action. I'll show you probably in another video how you can, for example, in a controller you don't have to return a view. Well, actually, let me show you here, why not? You can actually go ahead and put a string in. So for example, if you wanted to return the about view, you could do it that way. There's no reason why you'd want to do that. That is simply just for the sake of an example. So if you went to the home controller, so domain / home / contact, in this instance actually what will end up being returned as the view will be the about file. So this is the about view, so this one here. And shared, let's have a look. We've got, for example, a layout file, and this actually will give us our house style, if you like. It's a template so that actually we've got all of the head tags, and we've got the essentially the HTML that will surround our page. And here where it says render body, that is actually where our view will be placed. So let's have a look at the view again quickly. If we go to about, there's very little in here. So essentially what happens is this piece of HTML gets placed within the layout file, and it will be put in here. So when the view is rendered back to the client, this is the HTML that's going to be used, and whatever view they got will go in here. You don't have to use this layout file. You can create your own layout files. Alternatively, you don't even have to use a layout file, but it's probably a good idea to do so for continuity across your web application. You've got an error one as well. As you can probably tell, this is what you'll get served if there's an error. View start, nothing particularly interesting in there. What else have we got? Let's have a look a little bit further down. We've got a fave icon. So this probably by default doesn't have much going. Yeah, it's just a very simple little icon. You can change this and then you'll have your own icon for the site. So essentially what will happen is, let me view this. Let me view one of these views in a browser. So what will generally happen is if you create your own fave icon, you'll get actually when you bookmark the page, and likewise in the corner you'll get that icon. Obviously you'd have to create one for that to show up. What else have we got? Global.asax. So this is like a kind of an old file that is used to basically write code for application events. So as you can see here, we've got an application underscore start, and we're doing a whole bunch of different things. And in this instance, actually what you can see is we're registering the bundle, the root and the filter config files that are here, which is quite interesting to see. I think that in newer versions of .NET projects, I think they got rid of this. I think it's in core. I think they got rid of the global ASX file. Under here we've got packages, and the packages config allows you to define the packages that are being used in your project. So as you can see, we're using a number of different packages here. We've got Bootstrap, jQuery for example, and a bunch of other Microsoft ones that are there by default. And then under here we've got our web config file, and in the web config file, I suppose there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Probably for now the only thing you really need to know is the application settings. So this is where you'll put any configuration settings that you want to use in your application. So for example, add, and you have to give it a key, and you'll have to give it a value, and then you can actually access these settings in your application at runtime. So you could say my key and my value, for example. There's one more actually that you'll probably be interested in, and that is connection strings. So here you can actually add bunch of different connection strings, and they'll have a name, so my database, and then you'll have to provide a connection string as well, and that will be slightly different depending on what database, what type of database you're connecting to. So that was quite a quick overview of an MVC application. So hopefully some of these different folders and files will look a little bit more familiar to you now. But let's go ahead and have a look at how to update all of these packages. So as you can see, the project builds successfully, and if we want to look at a file, let's have a look, make sure it's all working, and it is working, which is great. So let's go ahead and update the packages. So what you'll want to do is right click on references and then click on manage NuGet packages. So this is going to go ahead, click on installed. Okay, so these are all of the packages we have installed, and what you're going to want to do, especially if this is a new project, is you're going to want to make sure that all of these are using the latest versions, because there may be bugs that have been fixed, security vulnerabilities that have been fixed, etc, etc, or it could just be new functionality. And so sometimes though, once you've written a project, it can be difficult to get these things updated, because they may be issues, because you may be using, for example, something like, for example, in Bootstrap you may have created your entire site using a particular version of Bootstrap, and then a vulnerability is found. So that means you have to update Bootstrap package, which could actually end up breaking your entire site. And I'm going to show you an example of that, because as you can see from our current site, actually what I'll do is I'll show you that in a second. What we'll do now is, no, actually I'll tell you what, let's have a quick look. So just to make sure we're on the same page here. So if we have a look at our project right now, as you can see, everything looks nice. It's using a Bootstrap template, and if you remember rightly, as you saw, we're using in the package, we've got Bootstrap installed. So let's look at the packages again. We've got Bootstrap version 3.4.1 installed, and if we look at installed Bootstrap 3.4.1, which is great, and as you can see, our site looks absolutely fine. Everything seems to render perfectly well. Home, about, contact. So that looks great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to update all of these packages. So let's click on updates. Okay, so there's updates for a few packages, one of which is Bootstrap. So let's select all packages on the left hand side there, and let's click update. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but generally speaking I think it only takes a couple of minutes maximum. And what it's going to do now is it's going to go ahead and connect to the internet and download all of the latest packages. With any luck, this will be fairly painless. So let's click on do not show again, and all that Visual Studio is saying is we're about to make changes to this solution, click OK to proceed, and it's just telling you what the changes are basically. So these are the updates. It's updating jQuery, it's updating Bootstrap, and it's giving us the version that we're moving from and the version that we're moving to. So let's click on OK. License acceptance, I accept, because of course I've read them before. And as you can see down here on the left hand side, you can see what's happening. It is the output view, and you can see that it's adding various different packages and installing packages. Inconsistent line endings. If you use Visual Studio quite often, you'll see this a lot. I'm just going to say yes, get rid of that. The file has unsaved changes in this editor. Do you want to reload it? Yes to all. We want to reload any files that we had open because they've obviously been changed. Right, so that's been done now. We've got a warning, but not a particularly severe one. So let's build the project. So hopefully this will build. So click on build solution. Build's been started and success. And now if we look at installed, we've still got the same packages installed. And if we look at updates, we've got no updates. So this is this is exactly how you want to start your MVC application. So you've got all of the latest updates and you're good to go basically. If we go to our packages file, we're probably going to see the latest version. So Bootstrap's on version 4.6.0. If we right click on references, NuGet packages, let's have a look at what's installed. We've got Bootstrap 4.6.0. I can't remember what the previous version was, but as you can see now, our packages config now contains the latest versions. The only other thing I'm going to show you is if we right click though on one of our views, let's say about view in a browser, what you're going to notice is that our CSS has been broken. So you can see that all of the top banner has completely been trashed by the update, and this is exactly why it's always a good idea to go ahead and make sure that you do all of the updates at the start of a project, because once you already have the CSS and all your pages created, there's no telling what kind of knock-on effect you may cause by upgrading packages. So always best to do the updates right off the bat so you're ready and good to go. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to show you quickly how to get a new template. I'm not going to implement it because we could be here for another 10 minutes and this video is already long enough, but if you type in get bootstrap, and here we go, the top link, and if you click on examples, here you'll see a bunch of examples using the latest version of Bootstrap. So what you're probably going to want to look at, let's have a look. Well, starter template could be the one to go for. Yeah, let's go with that. So let's go with the starter template, which is here it is. So what I would do is I would download this template, for example. Actually, you know what? I'm not going with that one. I don't like that one. I want one with a nav. Let's have a look. This one here, maybe it's got a nav bar. Yeah, this will probably do. So as you can see, we've got ourselves a nav bar. So this is very similar to the template that we had before. We've got a sticky footer, which is pretty awesome. So the footers are always going to be stuck to the bottom of the browser. We've got a little search facility at the top there with a button on it, and we've got a whole bunch of we've got a nav bar and some sub links. So we've got home, link, dashboard, perfect. So what I would do is I'd go ahead and copy this as a template. You can go to, for example, view source, and you can copy it this way, although I'm sure there's a way that you can actually download this. Let's have a look. Let's go back. Download source code, there it is, and download examples. So you can go ahead, choose a template that you like, and then all you need to do is go back to your application, and remember that file we saw earlier, underscore layout. You would basically just modify this file so that it then contains the new HTML, because all of this HTML doesn't work anymore with the latest version of Bootstrap, and that's no big deal. I kind of expected it, and this is out of the box HTML anyway, so you're probably going to want to go ahead and create your own HTML. And I think, to be honest, that probably wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed the video and made it this far, then fantastic, congratulations, and don't forget to like the video. And if you want to see similar content to this in the future, consider subscribing, because I'm going to keep this content coming, and we're going to go through different aspects of MVC and C# and Visual Studio and coding and all that kind of stuff. So until next time, take care.